Good morning, everybody. It's Denise with Lazy K Homestead. Well, I hope y'all are doing good. Everybody's well. I've got my ginger and tea with me this morning with honey from our bees. And you can hear the roosters out there crowing. I don't have witchy poo in the greenhouse. That's where I am this morning. But I've got those roosters and hens that are all around wanting to know what I'm doing inside here. But let me take a little sip there and tell you what's on tap for today. Well, we are going to start growing some sweet potato slips. And these are sweet potatoes that we grew last year, and they're Beauregards. And we grow these here on the farm. And I haven't sold any of these. I am going to do quite a lot this year because I'm going to try to sell some of them. So I just wanted to bring you along on this journey because I usually do grow them and just give them away, but they're so expensive now. And people are like, you need to sell them. So I thought, well, I'll try. I mean, I do like to give things away to help others if they need. I'd rather have everybody have a garden and me help contribute to it than somebody not being able to afford a garden. And so, you know, I think we need to help community. So with that being said, I wanted to show you what my tools are that you need for this. Now there's two ways to do it, and I do the water method. I've tried the dirt method before and not had much success. My sweet potatoes rotted in the ground and I only had one slip come up. So if you remember in elementary school, which I think most of us did, and they probably still have this project, you have a jar of water and you have a sweet potato. Bring a sweet potato from home. Now this is a long time ago. I'll get into that in a minute, when you could bring sweet potatoes from home. But anyway, you would just put toothpicks in it and set it in there and watch it grow. And that's basically what we're doing. There's another step to it to actually have slips, and I'll get into that in a minute. So I have got, let's see if I can put this down here for a second. Hold. Okay, I've got my tripod down as far as it'll go. But like I said, I have got jars of water. And this is just rain barrel water. You can use tap water, whatever you want to use. Just fill your jars almost all the way up, because once you put your sweet potato in there, you want to make sure that it is at least 2 to 3 inches into the water, like so. Okay, the tools that I'm going to use today, I bought skewers. You can just get them at Dollar General for $1 for all of these. They're wooden skewers. You can also use toothpicks if you want, but I have found recently that toothpicks are really flimsy and I don't really like the quality, and I want to have something that's going to go in my sweet potato without any problem. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and cut these probably, let's see, 4 inches. So I'll be able to get 2 of that. And you're going to want at least 3 of these skewers in your potato to hold it securely. So, and these are just wire cutters, or we call them dikes where I come from. Dad always called them that, so that's what I always called them. Okay, so we've got our skewers ready, 3 of them here. Some have a pointy end, some don't. They all will go in. Now with your potato, you're going to have a pointy end and kind of a rounded end. And the rounded end is the end that you want in your water, and that's where the roots will grow. And every one of these potatoes, like that right there, will be an eye. And you'll have a lot of plants grow off of these potatoes. And that is the second step, and that we'll get to when it's that time. But you just go ahead and you put them in your potato. You don't have to put them in far. Just know it's secure in there, like so. And I kind of do it at an angle. A little bit tough. Okay, like so. And I just pop it right in there. Okay. Now I'm going to have to go ahead and add a little bit more water. And you want to keep these watered all the time, because that's how these grow, in the water. And the roots will come down and you'll see little plants forming on your potato. So what happens then is, once the roots are forming and the potato has little sprouts, and you'll see it's a pretty little green plant that we all saw in school, you're going to gently take that off of this potato once it's ready, and then you're going to put those in water and they will grow, and that's what's called a potato slip. And it's very easy, very inexpensive. Now, getting back to sweet potatoes that are in the grocery store. Now, we live in a very rural community, and most of our produce is local. So I would say that they have not been sprayed with that spray that farmers put on for potatoes and sweet potatoes that inhibits them from sprouting. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but it may be called growth inhibitor. That's kind of coming to mind. But if you do live in a large city, you may not want to use a sweet potato from your big box store. If you can find a farmer's market and buy sweet potatoes from them, I think you'll have better luck growing potato slips. I guess they do that because well, white potatoes especially will grow eyes. And let me just show you what that is. Here is a white potato. These are Kennebecks that we grew last year. And those are eyes. And every one of those eyes, there's several on there, can be cut into sections, and that will create a potato plant. And you plant that in the ground and you'll have potatoes. So if you guys are wanting to plant potatoes, that's the way to do it. You can plant them in containers, at least a 5-gallon bucket, because they are a root vegetable and they need to have ground to go down in. They've got a really nice plant that comes up, and they will flower, a little white flower, and that's how you grow white potatoes. So that might be something y'all might be interested. I just am fascinated. All my life I've been fascinated with how things grow and how our vegetables are produced. I just think it's the coolest thing. So let's get back to sweet potatoes. We'll put Mr. White Potato back in the box. That'll be probably next month. We'll be out growing those. So I have got all these here. I'm going to go ahead and put sweet potatoes in, and I'm going to just go ahead and do that. I'm not going to do fast motion or anything. I'm just going to go ahead and do it like I normally would. And I'm just going to talk a little bit. Well, that one have to be careful when you're using these wire cutters here, because these will kind of shoot off into the ground or the floor, wherever you're doing this. So I wanted to talk a little bit. It's getting to be that time, and I've done a couple videos on gardening and companion planting. So I thought while I was doing this, I would talk a little bit about your garden and getting your garden ready. And whether you're a first-time gardener or someone that has gardened a little bit, or even a experienced gardener, you'd still need to know these things. And what I'm talking about is your frost date. And that is when the last frost is for the beginning of the year. And that is usually, for me, it's May. The end of April sometimes. I just watch the weather. So we are around May 15th. We can plant things like squash and sweet potatoes, things that are above the ground that would get hit by a frost. Now, backing that up, there are some things that you can plant above ground, like cabbage, broccoli, greens, like collard greens, Brussels sprouts, onions. Those all can actually take cold. Um, Not serious prolonged cold, but it can take cold weather and they'll bounce back. And those are kind of called cold weather, and they're kind of a cold weather harvest plant too. Um, and I don't mean cold like freezing cold. I'm just saying 50s, 60s, where it's comfortable, but the plant still can grow well in that. And with cabbage, broccoli, all those that I mentioned, except for the onions, one of the reasons that they are a cold weather harvest plant, and usually you harvest maybe in June, 65 days from the time that you plant. So if I planted cabbage in April, it would be sometime in June that I would harvest. And the reason being is the pests that are associated with cabbage and broccoli and collard greens and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. They're little moths, and they like to grow eggs on the underside of those plants, and then the worms hatch and the eggs hatch, and then the little worms, it's hot in here, so if I'm sweating, I'm sorry, will emerge, and they'll start eating your cabbage and broccoli. And with broccoli, it's really kind of nasty because they'll get into the little trees of the broccoli, all the little branches, and form webs. And once that happens, you really can't harvest it because it's very, very hard to get the webs out. You can get the worms out, but the webs are still in there. So that's why I say you really need to watch. We try not to use any pesticides if it's possible on on any of our stuff. Now, I've used neem oil, which I think is pretty good. I've also used Dawn dish soap with the vinegar and the water. That works pretty good. I try not to use anything that I wouldn't want to eat. So, you know, neem oil you can you can harvest the next day. So I've used that on my beans and my cabbages and things like that. And it suffocates the eggs and the worms. Hopefully you catch it before the worms hatch. That is the big thing. Or you can just take them off, rub them off with your hand, but you've got to gather them and get them out of that dirt because they still will hatch and they'll still find their way up to that plant. So anyways, getting back to the frost date. Okay, so you've got your seedlings, and you can see I've got my seedlings back here: cabbage, broccoli, some tomatoes. So you're going to want to look at the frost date, and with cabbage and broccoli, cauliflower, the Brussels sprouts and the collards, you can go ahead and plant them here in zone 6B, right around the end of April. And I always look at the weather, because if I'm looking 10 days out and I see that's going to be mild, and I try to look at a monthly forecast to kind of know where the weather's going to be. And as a gardener, you really need to be aware of your weather forecast. I mean, you can use frost covers, which I have. I have these frost covers right here that I keep. Now they last, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years. If you take them up and you put them away out of the wet and keep them in the dry, they'll last pretty long. But you can put your frost covers over, and you can also buy the tunnels and plant in there and have your frost cover over your tunnel. You can use pots like this, maybe a little bit bigger, but you can put that over your plant if it's going to frost and you weren't expecting it. You can do that too. So that's for the frost dates. You really need to be aware of that. Now, generally, there's kind of a couple frost dates you can look at, so you have a little bit of a leeway in there. I guess that's the best way to put it. for us, like I said, it's May 1st to May 15th. We can look at that time span and say, okay, I can go ahead and plant above ground crops. And that is, now if you have the plants, the seeds, they'll do okay, because generally like squash, which is a very, almost a succulent plant. If you've ever seen a squash plant, you know it's got a lot of water in the plant stalks. And you're not going to want them to be anywhere around any freezing weather, below 40 for sure. But you can go ahead and you can sow the seeds. You can buy squash plants. And if you're going to plant squash plants, you want to make sure that you're not going to have any frost in the forecast, because they are very susceptible and they don't usually bounce back. But if you want to plant the seeds in that second frost date, then you can, because it takes about 7 to 10 days for germination. We usually plant summer squash and winter squash, and both of them the same time you're going to plant them, even though winter squash takes a little bit longer for harvest time. And tomatoes are the same, bell peppers are the same. If you've got the plants, you want to make sure. Now, I highly recommend using plants for bell peppers and tomatoes, because they are a long germinating, long growing to get to the size where you buy them in the store, or here at my greenhouse, to put in the ground, because you want them to be at least that tall. And what's that, 10 inches? And you want to be firmly established with a good root system before you plant them. So I don't recommend planting them by direct sow in your garden, as it'll take a long time, and I have never been very successful with it. Now, perhaps if I lived in a grow area that was like 8B or 8AB, like in Florida or Georgia or somewhere like that, maybe even South Carolina, here in the United States, if you have a grow planting zone that's that warm, then you probably could do that. But I think it's just as easy to start your seeds here in the house or in your greenhouse, and you can just start them in just little cups, solo cups. People use a lot of those red solo cups, not just for beer. So that is just talking about the planting zones. And a friend of mine contacted me, and we are still talking, and she wanted me to help her with her garden. And she's gardened before, but she wants to try some different things this year. So we had a long conversation about all that I just talked about, and she was pretty excited about that. Now, if you are a gardener, and or want to be a gardener, you kind of have to decide how you want to plant. Do you want to use containers? Do you want to do raised beds? Do you want to do raised beds and containers in ground? However you want to plant, you're going to need to start getting that prepared soon, because it is getting to be, it's the middle of February here, and if you've got containers, you can start getting your dirt and getting those things, the containers filled, because that, is some time. Believe it or not, gardening does take time. It takes a lot of patience, but the joy of watching your things grow, and you grew that, and you've got all this to be able to feed yourself and your family and maybe your neighbors, and just share the joy is just part of it. And knowing where things came from, and knowing it wasn't sprayed with some chemical. The more and more I'm reading, the more I see that things are sprayed with these chemicals that make them ripen. Like, for instance, tomatoes, they'll pick them green and spray that back of that tractor trailer with a chemical that by the time they get to their destination, they're ripe. Now, to me, that's kind of gross. I've eaten those tomatoes, eaten them all my life. I didn't know that, but I've known that for quite a few years now, and I'm sure that it is okay. I mean, I don't know how okay it is, but you know, and they don't even have flavor, guys. So why not just try to grow your own? I mean, I'm a real advocate for that. You can just get 5-gallon buckets from Tractor Supply or Rural King or Lowe's. Just use them. Make sure you poke holes in them for a little drainage. But you can grow cabbage. You can grow uh, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, tomatoes, anything, squash, you name it. You can grow that in a 5-gallon bucket because it's got the length and the space and diameter to be able to um, give all that plant what it needs. And you're going to have good soil. Now, I don't have any problem with Miracle Grow dirt. Now, we do use that. We also have used Magic Garden, and you can make up your own dirt. You just kind of have to make sure you know what you're doing, because you're going to want to add, certain things to it. But if you use something that's already ready to go, there are raised bed soils out there already ready, bagged up. You can use that too. It's completely up to you. We have a lot of in-ground gardens here on the farm. And so we amend our soil every year with, you've heard me talk about mushroom compost before. Also, I use the rabbit manure and I let it dry. If I'm going to use it in containers, and then I just make it like a powder. You can use gloves, whatever you want, but you can make it like a powder, and that is nitrogen. You can get things like bone meal. Let me see, I've got some over here. Oh, it's right over here. My mistake. Blood and bone meal, which is really good. It's phosphate and nitrogen. Also potassium. A good way to add potassium to your soil is banana peels, or crushed eggshells is calcium. So those are just some things that you can think about. Just composting. If you haven't composted all that stuff, you can chop up bananas in your food processor, and they are kind of squishy and maybe, but they smell like bananas. And you can put that in your soil. You can put it in your soil, and it'll help. But if you've got a already prepared soil like Miracle Grow, you're not going to need any of that. Unless it's soil you used last year, and you're going to have to freshen it up with something. So those are just some little tips. And we freshen up or amend our soil every year. And I have raised beds. I have several raised beds. And I use bone and blood meal in them. And I just kind of mix it up in there and let the rain, or if I have to water, and it just gives nutrients back into the soil, because every plant that you plant is going to take from that soil, and you're going to have to give back. So I hope that helps with gardening. And you also with gardening, you're going to have to think about, what you want to plant, what kind of space you've got. If you're doing containers, how many containers you've got, how many plants you want to plant. And it can just be so much fun. Even with flowers, I grow flowers too. And you've got to amend your soil for the flowers everywhere. And I use the Miracle Grow because I just think it's the best. It's never let us down, and we've tried a lot of different ones. I don't get paid by them by any means. I'm just a simple little content creator here. I know a lot of people are kind of against it, but I think Miracle Grow has really come up with the times now, and they don't have any bad things, quote unquote, in their soil anymore, because a lot of people are going to organic. And I think that really is very important. I mean, we have enough chemicals floating around in this air that now we don't need to add any more to our fruits and vegetables, that's for sure, or to our, livestock. And so that's my soapbox. I don't try to get too political or too, anti this or anti that, but I'm just kind of telling you what is important to us as homesteaders, as farmers, as gardeners. And I try really hard to help anybody that needs some help. And if I don't know it, I'm going to research it. And I love learning and reading, and there may not be some things that I agree with, but you know what? At least I've read it and I know about it. So I'm not talking out of my head. And I think that's really important for anything that we do. Okay, now getting back to my sweet potatoes, which I kind of had gotten off that. What I also do, no matter what, is I journal every year. Now, I started this new journal last year, and all up front here is spring 2022. Everything that I wanted to grow, seeds that I had from last year, seeds that I need to buy. And I went through some of my seeds that I saved from last year, and I did see that some of the pumpkin seeds got a little moldy, so I'm just going to throw them out. But I have so many pumpkin seeds, I don't really need those extra. So you guys, you need to go through your save seeds and just see what you've got. And they were in a dry area too, so sometimes it just happens. So that's getting prepared for your garden this year. And I hope you're as excited as I am, because it can just be so much fun. Even if you just want to try a few containers, just try your hand at it and see how good you are and how fun it is to grow a tomato or grow a green pepper or grow a cabbage, things that you like to eat. And that's important too. Not saying that you can't try something new, but if you're going to try something, make sure it's something you like, because a lot of people will try and they'll say, oh, I really don't care for that. But the one thing you did do, you may not eat it, but you're learning how it grew, and you grew it yourself. And there may be a neighbor or a friend that likes whatever you grew, and then they'll take it off your hands, no problem. So I guess I'll go ahead and wind up this video. I'm going to finish putting these sweet potatoes in their jars with the water. And this is what it's going to look like, you guys. Every one of them will look like this, okay? And it will start sprouting with roots first. You're not going to see your plants come out of these eyes for quite a while. That root system has got to really start getting long and large, and it will start sending energy up into the top of this sweet potato, where those eyes are, and then you'll see the little sprouts. And that's also a cause for a smile on your face. But I'll be back probably in a couple weeks. I would say that these are going to start where I might be able to show you some of the plants that'll sprout out, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, well, I hope you stick with me. Have a happy Valentine's Day, and we'll see you real soon. Bye.